What's up everybody, and welcome back to the Cyclonic Thrift channel. This is the second week of looking at some of the cards from the new Modern Horizons 3 set release. And what the beauty of this set is that we have a bunch of new exciting cards, commanders that we can take a look at. We also have some really powerful reprints. Some cards that we haven't seen in a long time coming back around, and today I wanted to look at one of them and give it a chance to kind of revamp a deck tech for it. Which includes some of the cards that we've gotten from some recent sets that we can kind of bring in, see how they interact with the commander, and create a whole new sort of gameplay experience with this commander. Today, that commander is Laelia, the Blade Reforged. She's 2 and a red for a 2/2 legendary creature Spirit Warrior. She has haste, and whenever she attacks, you exile the top card of your library, and you can play that card this turn, so you get a little bit of impulse draw. And then whenever one or more cards are put into exile from your library and or your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Laelia. So obviously this is a reprint. This card has been around for a long time, a lot of deck techs built around it, and in terms of the strategy, we're not looking at anything super crazy, right? We're looking to exile a bunch of cards from our library, some from our graveyard as well. We're looking to get Laelia really big. We're looking to swing her in for a ton of damage. This is definitely a very Voltron-y type of deck. But there's also a sub-theme of we're trying to storm off, right? We're trying to Cascade, we're trying to exile and cast from exile. We're looking to do a little bit of Spell Slinger. Just as ways to generate value. Again, put a ton of +1/+1 counters on Laelia, swing her in for a ton of damage, and that's how we're going to win the game. The first set of cards that we're going to look at are cards focused around that second ability for Laelia. Is whenever we exile a card from our library, we put a +1/+1 counter on her. And the first card here is Connecting the Dots. It's 1 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks, exile the top card of your library face down. And then you can pay 1 and a red to discard your hand, sacrifice Connecting the Dots, and put all cards exiled with Connecting the Dots into their owner's hands. So this is a super cheap enchantment. You get this down early. It's whenever a creature you control attacks. So whenever any creature, it's not only for a certain player or an opponent. Obviously you'll get this off of Laelia, but any other creatures we get out there will as well. We're gonna exile a ton of cards with this enchantment. And on a later turn, again, when we're trying to storm off, we're maybe losing gas in our hand. Very easily we can get this up to 6-7 cards, pay 2 mana, discard whatever we've got in our hand, whatever things we've kind of flooded ourselves with, and just refresh it and keep going. So this card is going to provide a lot of gas for whatever engine that we set up. Next card is super simple, Reckless Impulse. 1 and a red for a sorcery. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Till the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. So again, that impulse draw that red is just famous for. We're going to buff up Laelia a little bit, but also give us some cards, some gas to be able to play out. Then we've got Ignite the Future, 3 and a red for a sorcery. Exile the top 3 cards of your library. Till the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, you may play cards this way without paying their mana cost. And then it also has Flashback for 7 and a red. So we'll be able to get kind of a 3-for-4 type of impulse draw here. And then if we want to later in the game, if we've got the mana to sink into this, there's a chance we hit a bunch of heavy hitters here. So that 8 mana investment is a lot for the Flashback, but it has this decent payoff as well. Now I'm just going to talk through some classic Voltron strategies here. We've got a lot of equipments in this deck we're going to try to attach to Laelia. As with any Voltron deck, she's going to be a huge target for removal. Your opponents are going to want to get her out of the way, and honestly, since this deck is really built around her, if she's not on the battlefield, then we're losing a lot of the value that we're getting from most of our spells. So first equipment here is Haunted Cloak. It's 3 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and it has Equip 1. So really that Vigilance and Trample are the real heavy hitters here. Again, we're getting Laelia up to massive power. That Trample is crucial to be able to get in damage against your opponents who, most likely will have some form of chump blockers And then the Vigilance, being able to keep her up as a blocker on your end, is going to be really key. Next, actually, I'm really excited about it. It's Tenza, Goto's Maul. 3 mana for a legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. As long as it's legendary, it gets an additional +2/+2. And as long as it's red, it has trample. So, and it has equip for 1. So, obviously, we're going to be using this mainly with Laelia, who is a legendary creature and is red. So it's a +3/+3 and trample, which again, that trample is going to be crucial. But the +3/+3 buff is insane as well. And for just equipping 1, once we get this on the battlefield, you know, whenever we get Laelia out, it's going to be pretty easy to buff her up really, really quick. And the last one here, we've got Meteoric Mace. It's 4 and 2 red for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +4/+0 and has trample. So again, that trample factor. It has equipped 4 and also has Cascade. So like I said, Cascade is a decently heavy theme in this deck. The benefit of Cascade is whenever you're exiling cards, the game has to check for each individual one. So each card you exile with Cascade is going to trigger Laelia's +1/+1 counter ability. As opposed to some of our earlier cards where if you're exiling 3 cards at once, it only triggers Laelia once, right? But for Cascade, you're getting a +1/+1 counter for each card you exile from the top of your library. And then the +4/+0 and trample, again, buffing her up to the moon. But it's that Cascade that really makes this an include in this deck. Yeah, and then finally we're just going to look at a few more cards that fit into that exiling Cascade theme, right? We're wanting to get our cards into exile, cast them from exile, all that good stuff. First is very, very simple. Into the Time Vortex, a new card from the Doctor Who set. 4 and a red for a sorcery. It has Cascade. So again, when you cast this, you're going to be exiling cards, looking for a card that costs less. And it has Rebound, which means that this goes, well, you know, when you cast this, you then exile it and then cast it again at the beginning of your next. So it's very much a 2-for-1 situation here. You're going to get that Cascade trigger twice, and you're going to get a ton of counters on Laelia as a result. Next card is Surge to Victory. 4 and 2 red for a sorcery. Exile target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. Creatures you control get +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is that card's mana value. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player this turn, copy the exiled card, and you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So, a lot of things going on right now. So 1, we're exiling a card from our graveyard, so we're going to put a +1/+1 counter on Laelia. 2, we're going to pump all of our creatures up. You know, the bigger the spell, the bigger the pump. And then 3, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player this turn, copy it. Now, the interesting part about that is you'll copy it for each creature that deals combat damage. So if you have 3 creatures out, and you get them all in for combat damage on this turn, then you get to copy that spell 3 times. Now, we're almost guaranteed to get a combat trigger off of Laelia because, again, we're pumping her up a ton, hopefully giving her trample. We're going to get her in for some damage. But we're going to have quite a few other creatures on the board, hopefully somewhat evasive, and if they get that extra combat in and we get some extra triggers, we could very easily storm off with a massive spell, which would be really cool. And then we've got Dance with Calamity. 7 and a red, so 8 mana. For a sorcery, shuffle your library. As many times as you choose, you may exile the top card of your library. If the total mana value of the cards exiled this way is 13 or less, you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana cost. So this is a super cool gambling card where you're paying 8 mana into this, and then you exile cards from the top of your library, right? And you're, you know, under normal circumstances, you're hoping to stay under that 13 mana value or less threshold, where you can then cast them all. And obviously, for the first few, it doesn't matter. You know, you're not going to get 13 mana in one card or whatever. But once you get to an accumulated mana value of, like, say, 6 or 7, maybe even up to like 9 or 10, then you start to be like, do I exile the next card? Because there's a chance that it puts me over that 13 threshold and then I can't cast any of them for free. Or do I cut my losses, only maybe get 9 mana value out of these cards, which is still a good deal, obviously mana positive for this particular card. So there's that way of going about this card. The other way is, if Laelia is out, we get to exile as many cards as we want and put pretty much as many +1/+1 counters on Laelia as we want, and we don't even have to worry about that 13 mana value threshold, right? We're not worried about casting those spells, because if we get, depending on when you cast this game, you could put 50 +1/+1 counters on Laelia, which, again, with trample and commander damage, is going to be a one-shot kill on somebody. Play obviously you're going to have to play this smart, and there might be situations where you have this in hand and you don't want to cast it yet. But in a one-on-one situation, this is a win con with Laelia, as long as they don't have removal or don't counter the spell. So there's two ways to go about this card. I think either way is really beneficial to this deck, and one of the ways straight up wins you the game if you're in a one-on-one situation. So definitely an include for this deck. And then we're going to get into the vegetable portion of the deck. For those of you who haven't seen the channel before, the vegetable portion is when I talk through groups of cards that, if you want to maintain pace with the higher budget decks at the table, you have to include cards in these categories. So mana ramp, card draw, removal absolutely have to be in your deck in sufficient numbers, or you're not going to have a consistent enough gameplay to keep up with those higher power decks. So for ramp cards, we've got cards like Runaway Steamkin, 1 and a red for a 1/1 creature elemental. You're casting red spells, putting +1/+1 counters on it, and then removing those counters to add mana. We've got Beamstown Beanstick. It's 1 red for an artifact equipment. Gives the creature a buff and some evasion with that menace. Again, that Voltron aspect of it. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, trade a treasure token. And then we've got Shiny Impetus. It's a 2 and a red for an enchantment aura, giving a creature a buff and the attacking trigger of creating a treasure token. So all of these are viable ways of doing this. You've got 2 that are more associated with combat, but to be honest, this Shiny Impetus you can also attach to your opponent's creatures if they've got a big beater. You're still getting that treasure impact out of it. But you're also sending a massive problem to your opponents that they're going to have to deal with. For card draw, we've got cards like Infiltration Lens. It's a 1 mana equipment. Again, that equipment Voltron style. Whenever it becomes blocked, you draw 2 cards. So, you're going to kind of you're going to dissuade your opponents from blocking whatever creature you've got, most likely your commander. Got cards like Thrill of Possibility, 1 and a red for an instant. You're discarding cards, drawing cards. This is a classic red sort of card draw spell. And then we've got Galvanic Relay, 2 and a red for a sorcery. Exile the top card of your library. During your next turn, you may play this card. And then it has Storm. So again, that's storming off, casting a lot of spells. Each of these will trigger separately, so each of them, when you exile the top card, will put a +1/+1 counter on Laelia. Not uncommon for you to get 5 or 6 triggers off of this. So it's going to be a very, very significant card in this deck. You have to wait to play him till your next turn, but at that point you'll have all your mana available to you, so hopefully it won't be too much of a downside. And then for removal, Mono Red has a lot of fun different cards like this. So we've got Chaos Warp, 2 and a red for an instant. You're taking a permanent, shuffling into the library, and then whoever had to do that reveals until they find or reveals the top card. If it's a permanent, they get to play it. So you play this on someone else's best thing. Hopefully they don't have something better at the top of the library. It is a bit of a gamble, but something that usually pays off. We've got Kazul's Fury, 2 and a red. As initial cost, you sacrifice a creature, and it deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to any target. This is a perfect card in this deck because most likely we're swinging in for our commander for a bunch of damage, and that takes out one player, and then we can sacrifice it in our second main to then deal damage equal to its power to another player and potentially kill them as well. Can kind of turn a one player kill into a 2-player kill pretty quickly. And then Fling, 1 and a red for an instant, basically the exact same thing. dealing damage equal to a sacrificed creature's power to target creature or player. Again, Laelia, we're going to get up to the moon. A lot of it's going to be based off of those equipments, so those equipments will stay. We'll just have to replay Laelia, attach those equipments back up, and we'll be in a similar state to when we sacrifice our commander. And that brings us to the Thrift pick of the deck. For those who haven't seen the channel before, the Thrift pick is not the card that I think is necessarily objectively the best card in the deck, but it's the card I'm really excited to play. It's a card maybe I don't play very much in other decks. It's a card I haven't seen before. A very powerful card. Just a card that if I see it in my hand, I'm excited to play it. And the card for this deck, the Thrift pick for this deck, is Apex of Power. So 7 and 3 red, so a 10 mana sorcery. Exile the top 7 cards of your library. Until the end of turn, you may cast spells from among them. And if this spell was cast from your hand, add 10 mana of any one color. So we're pretty much always going to be trying to cast this from our hand, even if we don't, trying to cast it from Exile. We're still getting that impulse draw, those top 7. It fits really well into the kind of storm off Exile cards strategy, and it's a big old beater. It's a big old mana cost card, type of card that I really love to play. It's a power bomb of a play, and I'm really excited to see how it plays into the different situations on the board. And that brings us to the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please like the video, comment down below, let me know of any cards that you think I might have missed. I know Laelia has been around for a long time, so I'm sure most of you have seen deck text before. If there's any budget cards that you think I might have overlooked, please let me know down in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and until next time, stay safe and stay thrifty.